Hello out there, and welcome to Answers for Today. My name's Bill Wynn, and I'm here in Studio G once again with Pastor Terry Reynolds from Agape Chapel, and we have a special guest today, a friend of mine who I've known for, I don't know, probably 4 or 5 years maybe, that we've been in Bible study together, a gentleman named Glenn Simmons. And Glenn is quite a fellow, actually. We got to know each other through Bible study, and he's a Navy veteran and has a family here in Southern California and has for a long time studied history, and of course is a strong believer and has a real desire to understand what history and the Bible say about nations. So what we're going to talk about today, Terry, is the biblical position or the biblical facts about where America is today, and maybe some of the things that need to be done to get it back onto a biblical track.
Glenn, I do really appreciate you spending some time coming on the program, and Bill, just one of the things is fun when you do these talk programs, that you're able to see the Bible from our studies really go to application and how it affects our real life, and where it's affecting our nation and where we stand as a nation. And I think a lot of times what we have to do is we need to look back so we can look forward, and for us to understand. And so, Bill, why don't you paint the kind of the premise where we're to be going on this program, and you guys take it, and I'm going to jump in where I can, and why don't we get started then?
Sure. One of the things that we see going on in society and in our culture today is a real lack of respect for the truth. In fact, in John chapter 16, verse 13, God talks about the fact that He, the Spirit of truth, which of course is the Holy Spirit, will come after Jesus ascended, and He will guide you into all truth. For He shall not speak of Himself, but whoever He shall hear shall speak, and He will show you things to come. So one of the things we're going to dig into today with Glenn is some concepts about what's going on in our society, and about how truth, it seems, has kind of been lost in the process. And so one of the things, Glenn, that you and I, when we first met, kind of got started on was sort of a business approach to things. And you have a long career that you built a national and international company, really, based on crisis management. And certainly, I think, as Christians, we would all agree, America's in a crisis situation right now. And what did you learn from the crisis management? What did you learn from the crisis management experiences that you had?
Well, my company was in high tech, and we did a lot of projects. And when a project derailed or was getting in trouble, I had to develop the skills over about a 30-year period of time or more to wade into the situation, to identify the root cause of the problem that we were having, and correct that root cause. And when that root cause is corrected properly, there's an autocorrect that takes place, and that autocorrect takes care of almost all the other problems that looked like they were standalone problems but really weren't. The minute if you do it correctly, and the root cause is taken care of, then it's amazing the results. So a friend of mine and I were talking. We used to go spend a month every year over in Utah playing in the woods. We were pretending to be deer hunters, But anyway, he was an interesting fellow. Was fluent in 9 languages.
Jewish fellow, right?
Yeah, right. Gabor Zakaris. Yep. He born in Hungary and escaped from behind the Iron Curtain. His father was a chemistry professor in Budapest.
Smart
and
guy.
Got out of there with his fiancée, and they ended up in the United States with a couple of bucks between them. And he ended up with a really successful international patents business. He handled a lot of major companies like Allergan. He had combination of doctorate in chemistry, doctorate in law, and like I said, fluent in 9 languages. So he was an interesting guy to have a conversation with. Now, when the Nazis were over there, they hid him out in the Catholic family so that he wouldn't be found and killed. And they kept his father alive because he was useful, and a couple of people in his family. The rest of them, in both his family and his wife's family, all wiped out. But anyway, so he had an interesting perspective, and one of the things we talked about a lot was that he was seeing the same things happening in the United States that he'd seen happening in Hungary under the Nazis and after the Nazis under the Russians. They all had fundamentally the same issues. So he came over here. They dug in. His wife is just retired. She was became a doctor at Kaiser, and they have 2 fine sons who are raising families over here. So after everything he went through, for him to see the same things happening in the United States that had happened, that he tried to escape from, that was really something else. And
so you guys start talking about the root cause of what causes a society or culture to, pardon the word, to evolve in the same way that the Nazism or fascism or communism, even for that matter, how it evolved in those various belief systems.
Exactly.
So the root cause, and he's a Jewish fellow
with a Christian point of view. He went through the catechisms and everything.
Okay, so
as a
you
child.
Guys together worked out a biblical approach to what the root cause was.
Well, actually,
what you thought it was
actually,
at that point.
The way it worked was we were talking about the problems in the country, and I said, "Look, let me take a look at this, and from a crisis management standpoint, try to identify the root cause." And since you're such a brilliant attorney, and one of his sons is a graduate of Duke Law, and the other was a graduate of Stanford Law, so that was a real powerhouse of legal
family.
So I went through a couple of years, more than a couple of years, off and on, not full time, digging into these things and analyzing, and I kept coming up with the same root cause. And that root cause was that none of these things would exist if our leaders couldn't lie to us with absolute impunity.
Which is the foundation, really, of Nazism and communism, and fascism, and all the other issues.
But that's not what I was looking for. What I was looking for is one of those aha moments, where I finally find the root cause, and which is part of what I used to enjoy with the
business.
So, but I kept coming up with a simplistic sounding a root cause, and
it's biblical,
so
right?
I was but I was almost embarrassed to go to him with it. I said, "Look, I've looked at this problem and that problem and all these different problems, and I keep coming back to the same thing. If our leaders couldn't lie to us with absolute impunity, these things couldn't exist. And if they couldn't continue to lie to us with impunity, they would self-destruct. All these problems because they depend on sustaining the initial base of lies for their survival."
It's basically propaganda.
Yeah, well, propaganda is
really a lie.
It's just all the different flavors of lying, right? So,
can I back up just for a second on here, because I think it's important what you kind of opened up with John 16, and I want to read something that you guys gave me where it says, "All Scripture gives us all truth. The United States Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and all the laws are based upon Judeo-Christian foundation."
Right.
So you're saying that somewhere or another from the beginning, Bill, we were based on strong biblical foundation that was based upon truth, and what we're seeing is that we now have moved away from that, where we're now moving to where, like you were saying, all the way from the Nazis and everything else, where we're now a country of deception, what you're saying.
Right, and it ties back to Zechariah 8, which I think is so cool because your friend is a Jewish guy, and so now we got an Old Testament verse that we can go to him and
Yeah.
and say, you know, this is what God says about what we're talking about. And he says, these are the things that ye shall do. Speak every man the truth to his neighbor, and execute judgment of truth and peace in your gates. So foundationally, this is what God is saying, and of course this is kind of where you're going, is that if you could get everybody to speak the truth to one another, you wouldn't have some of the other problems that we have in society.
Absolutely. And let me let me give you my translation of we're always batting translations back and forth. I have a hard time with King James sometimes. So this may be a little clearer. It's Zechariah 8:16-17, same. It says, speak the truth to each other, and render true and sound judgment in your courts. Do not plot evil against your neighbor, and do not love to swear falsely. I hate all this, declares the Lord. So that's some pretty strong talk. And you mentioned history. The impact on this country is this. You mentioned the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. Well, our founding fathers, when they were putting the country together and putting those documents together, they used the Bible as a guideline, not because they were trying to promote religion, but they treated the Bible as a book of wisdom, an infallible book of wisdom, okay? And they tested everything they did against the Bible to make sure it didn't conflict. If it conflicted, they treated it like a red flag, and they went back, identified the potential problem, and corrected it. So that, from the very beginning, is the basis of everything we have in the Constitution, in the Bill of Rights, in all the laws that were passed initially and throughout the early years of the country.
And they believed so much that the biblical values needed to be inculcated into the society that I think you and I were talking that the first appropriation of the first Congress was to buy Bibles for every home or every family in America, and then they had to get them from England, which this is right after the Revolutionary War. So, we got to go to the guys we just whipped.
But that was really important.
But they did it anyway, and then the second Congress,
second year, right?
The second year they appropriated the money to buy the Bibles again. It's a little different than what we have today, folks. Today the government won't even let you have a Bible anywhere.
That's right,
But the first and second Congress appropriated the money to buy the Bibles to give them to everybody.
In the second year, they appropriated the money to fund an American printer, so they wouldn't have to buy them from England. So they were made in American Bibles.
We need to make sure that Nancy Pelosi and the rest of them watch this program.
Exactly, it'd be good.
Wait, let me back up, okay? I want to, kind of put the shoes on a couple hundred years ago when these guys are penning this Constitution, guys. When you're talking about truth, what you read out of Zechariah, that wasn't an issue. They spelled truth to their neighbor. They wanted to be forthright with the people that they're representing. There wasn't a deception or something that was hiding behind the scenes, is pretty much what you're saying here in the Foundations Bill, right?
Correct. And like Glenn said, if they felt like they were writing a Constitution or a Declaration of Independence that conflicted with the truths of the Bible, the fundamental foundational principles like this one, they would use it as a red flag and rewrite it.
So they have this document, and as they're writing the documents, they have the Word of God sitting there.
Sitting right there.
And they say, hey, let's look at this amendment. No, how does it line up with God's
Word? What they did is they wrote a draft and spread the draft out amongst all the people of the convention.
Many of which were pastors.
Many of which were pastors. And they were all Christians. There was only one Catholic, but there was a Catholic there. Everybody else was Protestant, I guess. But then they'd take it away, and they'd compare it against the Bibles, and then they'd come back and discuss any potential problems, any potential conflicts.
Can you imagine
That's
if
the way
they did that today?
That's the way they fine-tuned it. But again, it was taught. The Bible was taught as a book of wisdom, From that point on, in all our public school systems, but originally those Bibles were going to into every home, and the women in the family were responsible for teaching their children to read out of the Bible. That did two things. It gave us a completely literate society, and it inculcated the Judeo-Christian ethic in the entire society. So because we had the same value system, there was harmony in society, because harmony is the strength and support of all societies, and they knew that.
Wow.
And without that common value system, so that's why it was so important to the Founding Fathers. They weren't promoting any particular religion. They weren't even promoting Christianity. They were promoting the Bible as a book of wisdom to God, is the primary guide for the country that they were developing.
So now here you are with Gabor, your Jewish friend, and you figured out through the crisis management experience, what the root cause is, and then the two of you on one of your fake deer hunts go out and you figure out, okay, here's what we need to do as a next step. And so what did you guys do?
What I did is I went to Gabor. I was almost embarrassed. I said, look, here's what I've done, and here's where I am.
Root cause.
And I don't know if anything like this could even be done. I mean, is there any way that you could write a law or something to correct this situation? And Gabor said, well, let me take a look at it, okay? And at that point, I wasn't about to play attorney. He started to look at it, and I went ahead and filled the paperwork out and got the ball rolling, because we were going to put it on the ballot as an initiative in California if we could get a law written and
to basically put it to a public vote. Right.
So while the lawyers are working
on the language,
and I'm out talking to the people in California, and all the way from the most liberal people you could imagine. I know a lot of people up in Los Angeles, used to live up there, that are ultra liberal to the ultra conservatives. An interesting thing, every single voter that I talk to just about has strong political opinions. That's why they're voting.
Yeah.
And they all believe that anybody who doesn't agree with their political opinion is lying, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
And since the truth isn't a Republican thing or a Democrat thing or a liberal thing or a conservative thing, the truth belongs to everybody, and it turns out everybody is really, really feels that it's important to them.
Now, what year was this? Was this in the 80s or something?
It's been about 15 years since we started
2000.
this project.
Okay.
And it took years to actually. So we got a hold of the Secretary of State's office in California.
And California's still very liberal back then, even. Right?
Well, yeah, but the Secretary of State's office is full of attorneys, right? So we told them we were checking this out. We're businessmen, right? If this can't be done constitutionally, we want to know up front. We don't want to waste our time, right?
Yeah.
So we talked to these guys. They thought we were trying to pull something, because apparently what people do is they write an initiative, they get it in front of the voters, they vote it in, and then they argue about whether it's constitutional, which is exactly the reverse of what a businessman would think, right?
Yeah. Why waste the money and the time?
Anyway, we ended up having the one attorney that was the lead attorney in our contact up there was in charge of the criminal investigations division of the Secretary of State's office, and he finally came to the conclusion we really were just a couple of guys trying to do what we said we were trying to do. Wow. And then they became a lot more cooperative, and they opened up to us. And so this bill was, although it's not officially, it wasn't like they were officially writing it for us. They were giving us a lot of advice, telling us what would work, what wouldn't. They argued for hours about and or things like that. Attorney things, right?
So, what did you name? What have you named this now? This concept or this root cause?
It's called the Truth and Accountability Bill. The Truth and Accountability Bill.
I want to stop for a second, Bill. If people want to look at a website about it, Glenn, do you have a website where they can go to?
truthandaccountabilitybill.org.
I'll put it up on the screen so you guys
Okay.
can see it and go to it and look at it in detail. Then
Truth and accountability, Bill. It's like trying to remember a short sentence. It's pretty easy to remember. The reason why the name's so long is you don't get lost in a search engine. I mean, if you just put truth up there, the truth will, you get like 10,000 pages you have to look through. So that seems to be doing the trick. So truth and accountability.
So you guys took this all the way to and you got it approved by the Attorney General
and
in
we
California.
had to make sure that it didn't conflict with federal or state law.
So he reviewed the whole thing, the language, and what was in it, and was okay that it wasn't in violation of the First Amendment or anything else.
So it's simple and straightforward, and it's in plain English. I insisted. I said, I don't want a lot of legalese in here. People have to be able to read it and understand it easily. There's one word or one phrase, material fact, is the only legalese in the whole thing. It's a paragraph long. It's
very
plain.
Short.
It's like the founding fathers used to do. You know, it's brief, direct, and to the point, and it's bulletproof. And on the website, there's a link if you want to actually see the text of the law. There's the paragraph, which is the law, and then there's an explanation of every single word, so you have a definition of every word.
So on your website, people can go to that, see this very concise, hard-hitting law now that you and your friend, and I agree with you. I think it's one of the, I don't know about the root cause. Obviously, I think the root cause is that more people need to read their Bible and they need to become Christians. But at the end of the day, this law would make people accountable, and who would be covered under that?
Are you talking about political people who are holding office?
Anybody. Here's the thing: if they're running for office, anybody who's running for office, anybody who's holding elected or appointed office, any politician, any bureaucrat. And it also covers anybody in the media, because it turns in the media, right?
Whoa.
Because it turns out that with all the protections we have of free speech and everything, what isn't protected is anybody's right to lie to the public. And the reason why material fact is in there is it's a term that judges have been using for hundreds of years to determine whether somebody's in contempt of court. If you've lied in their court about something that's important, they'll hold you in contempt of court. So what this does is it takes that old standard, which has been established forever, doesn't have to reinvent anything, and it just applies it to the loophole in the law.
So material fact, it has a case history and a legal definition.
Yeah.
So basically, and I think you used the word when you and I talked about it, of people that are in the public trust.
That's right.
Which is those people who are politicians, a media outlet that would be
the best way of thinking
to the
about
public,
it,
right?
The best way of thinking about it is any place where tax money flows, in the schools, in the throughout the entire federal.
So you're saying that if someone made a misrepresentation of a material fact who was on school payroll or something,
right,
that they could be held accountable by this bill.
That's right.
This bill does not overlap with our libel laws. That's correct, right?
No,
it's
it doesn't
a completely
conflict
different thing than libel.
The libel laws are so nebulous and so vague. This is very, very targeted. If you lie about a material fact, now all the media, for example, up until recently was required to separate news, which is fact-based, from opinion, op-ed, which is opinion, okay, which is not fact-based. Can't be backed up with fact. Now, they've convoluted the two, and to the point where that's gone. Now, the other thing about this bill is it's set up so anybody can bring suit. You don't have to wait for an attorney general to get around to doing it. Anybody can do it. If you can walk into a judge and you convince him that you have evidence that somebody's lied about a material fact, and he's satisfied that evidence is valid, then he'll let the the case into his court, and you can sue him. So what this is designed to do,
accountability.
What it's designed to do is be a massive deterrent. It isn't designed to fill our prisons with politicians and bureaucrats.
No.
And it's designed, see, the way they explained this to us in Sacramento is these people are addicted to power, to money, to things like that, and they are just like addicts. So it takes a really strong antidote to cure an addict. And so this is designed, what it does, it will jail, fine, and banish from ever working in the public trust again in any capacity anybody who's tried and found guilty of lying to the public about a material fact.
Wow.
So
let me, because we only got a few minutes
just a
left,
couple
guys.
minutes,
Let me go back to one of the questions when we opened up. Biblically, who is covered by this requirement to speak the truth when you look biblically?
Well, and if you do the thing that we like to do here, right?
Yeah.
We say that who does God say to speak truth to, and what kind of truth? It says to all men. So everybody should be speaking the truth to one another.
So we're not picking on anybody.
No.
But
All Christians and Jews are required to tell the truth.
So as we go back to our founding fathers, like you said, as they sat around that table, speaking of truth was not even something that was an issue.
They just did it.
It was an assumption that it was being done.
It isn't that they don't tell war stories or fish tales. I mean, my grandmother had some stories which you wouldn't. I mean, but the thing is, if it was about something important,
material facts,
and if you now, the people that are our leaders are the ones that set the tone for the country. They set the standards for the country.
Right.
If they live by the truth, the country will tend to live by the truth. If they live by the lie, and there are plenty of people who love the lie, hate the truth, fear the people, and seek to gather all power and wealth to themselves, that are sitting in Washington, and they're poisoning our country with the example that they're setting.
And we see that historically with the Israelites too. When you think about it, with the kings and the judges, and
when they choose not to lead in truth, it follows. You know, the thing is so amazing. What Paul wrote to young Timothy in 1 Timothy chapter 4, he says, "Be thou an example to the believers." Otherwise, in conversation or lifestyle, and as Glenn and Bill have been talking about, conversations is real. People listen to our words. And John tells us that we should speak the truth in love. We should be about the truth, as Jesus said about himself. He says, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." And so until next week, I hope you tune in, tell your friends. We'll be back again talking more together with Glenn about these important issues. May God richly bless you.
About this broadcast, or if you have any questions, feel free to mail us at Agape Chapel OC, P.O. Box 4023, Huntington Beach, California, 92647. Or you can email us at aft@agapechapelOC.org. Or visit our website at agapechapelOC.org. Until next time,